It is introduced by the official sponsor, Rally Care. Thank you for Rally Care for his continuous support as an official sponsor of athletes and uh, coaches of Special Olympics. Thank you all for joining this webinar. We are always looking forward to giving more learning opportunities in the fields where you want to learn from. Today's webinar is on how the youth learn and what this means to Special Olympics with ICOACHKIDS. This webinar offers simultaneous interpretation in 8 languages. You can just click the button in the bottom of the screen. Please add any questions you have to speakers in the chat box. I am Mujahid Al-Sarhani from the Sultanate of Oman, the messenger for MENA region. I play in the Omani special sports in Oman since 2015. I got badminton and got 2 silvers, and ground tennis and got 1 medal, gold medal, and also participated in the youth regional youth for MENA region in the year 2014. Amongst the achievements I had is being the scout school chief and media chief at school, and also participated in the football championship in Muscat College, and we ranked first. It was an inclusion, a championship on inclusion of children with disabilities, with those without disabilities, and I achieved the highest award, which is the high diploma of the Middle East in badminton. My contribution today in the Special Olympics, before the participation, I was worried, I was afraid, I did not concentrate, I did not have the courage to participate. Now, one of the greatest achievements I had is that I'm a member of the Special Olympics. I also participated in the rehabilitation of players so that they become assistant coaches in the year 2023. I also participated in a training course of trainers for the games of MATP. And now my role is a messenger of the MENA region. I represent my colleagues, players, leaders, in order to communicate our voices that we are able to make achievements. And the most important of which is the inclusion of the persons with mental disabilities into society. Declan O'Leary trains trainers in Ireland. He has interests in the fields of the training for the young people and with people with disabilities. He is also a founding member of ICOACHKIDS. Welcome, Mr. Lai. We are very happy to have you with us in this webinar. Welcome.
Thank you very much for that welcome and introduction. Just before I start, I will share my screen and we'll get up and running. Now, can I just check that that's the right screen with the webinar outline on it?
Yeah, all good, Declan, thanks.
Thanks very much, Jeff, and thanks for the introduction, Mujahid. I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation today to present to you in the Special Olympics International Global community. It's always an honor to be invited to do that. And it's really nice to meet you wherever you are in the world. I think that just checked there, there's 238 of us on the call, which is fantastic. I'm presenting on behalf of ICOACHKIDS, which itself is a global movement, and it would echo what Special Olympics are trying to do with the athletes that it works with. And I'll give you a bit more information, ICOACHKIDS, towards the end when we do some signposting. You'll see that the presentation focuses, because of our background in coaching children, that I'll mention children a lot, but please feel free to substitute athlete for children or for child, because it's based on evidence-based good coaching practice and coaching knowledge and coaching skills. So the challenge, I think, will be for you to consider how you will apply this with the athletes that you work with. In my day, I would have always advised people if you could have a pen and paper handy to take a few notes. It is something that you might be able to take away from the webinar today, 1, 2, or 3 things that resonate with you and you feel you could apply with the athletes you work with. As I say, in my day, it was pen and paper. In these days, you might be using a phone or a digital device or electronic device. So whatever way it is, try and capture the things that would apply to your own learning. What I've got here now is just an outline of the webinar. We have an ICOACHKIDS pledge with 10 principles, and I'm going to outline those quickly. If you have heard these before, they will just perhaps affirm, or 1 or 2 might resonate with you around your good practice, and there might be 1 or 2 that you'll consider applying. We're then going to go for a little bit of a deeper dive into 4 of the principles, which is the focus on foundational skills, engaging parents positively, looking at progressive programs and how you might put those together, and then just methods you might use to enhance learning, which will really be based on how you think the learners you work with and the athletes you work with will learn best. And then towards the end, we'll have some signposting to ICOACHKIDS resources, also some of the Special Olympic International resources, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So without further ado, on to the pledge and the principles. Before doing that, this is something that we put up. This is perhaps as a game from my day as well, as opposed to the modern games, Tetris. But really, this is about the game of Tetris is about putting the right pieces in the right place at the right time, and that very much works for coaching as well. When you think of it as you coach to be effective, you're trying to do the right thing at the right time and work on the right element or area of coaching you want the athlete to develop on for that athlete. So it's the right thing in the right place at the right time for that athlete. And that's a constant thing that should be going on in your mind through observation and seeing what's happening and you making decisions about what you go next. So there's no specific answers to questions that you might have here at the moment, but it is good principles of practice to what you might apply overall. So the pledge itself has 10 principles, and these are: number 1, be child-centered; 2, be holistic; 3, be inclusive; 4, make it fun and safe; 5, prioritize the love for sport above learning sport; focus on foundational skills is 6; 7 is engage parents positively; 8 is plan progressive programs; 9, use different methods to enhance learning; and 10, use competition in a developmental way. So I'm just going to go through those a little bit more slowly, and as I say, you can see how it resonates with your own practice. So the first one is be child-centered, and here you could say be athlete-centered. And really what that means is having the best interests of the athlete at the heart, at heart in what you're doing. And you should be listening to them to identify what they want to do, what their needs are. And the focus of what happens then is about the athlete or child that you're working with, not about the adults or the club or the competition. So that's just a critical lens for you to look at what you do with athletes that you work with, constantly trying to see it from their perspective. And the lens that tends to allow you to do that is to hear from them and observe their practice. You'll know what excites them. You'll know what they're not happy with. You'll know if they're bored. You'll know if they're excited. And you can work with all of those and make decisions about your practice. So that lens of being child or athlete centered is very important. The second one is be holistic. So what you're doing in your sessions with your athletes is that you're working with them as a person first and foremost, and then working with them as an athlete. So you're aiming to develop them as a person with their psychological skills, their social skills, and their overall capabilities, not just their physical ones. And when you think of it, very much here children can work on life skills. In relation to their development, we use an idea called the SPEC model, and it means that in their development, any child or athlete could be working on their social side of what they do, their physical development, which includes their sport skills and understanding of the games they play, cognitive, which will be the understanding end of it, and their emotional development. And any one athlete can be at different stages of development in each of those beams. And depending on the challenges that come across within your sessions, that can change. So you can see children who can get, their confidence might come and go depending on the challenge within an activity. The third principle is be inclusive. And I'm sure when you work with your group, there's all levels of abilities and all levels of motivations. And really, coaching is not one size fits all. So this comes back to the point earlier about you observing what's happening, the athletes with their general behavior and their specific behavior in relation to the activities that you're doing. So you'll get to know them, what works for them, and you'll be able to coach each of them somewhat differently. There'll be the athlete you have to take really small steps to help them and in their challenges, and you'll have those who want to jump in with 2 feet, and you perhaps can go somewhat faster with those. But if you're being, as we said, child or athlete centered, you can't coach one size fits all. You have to take each as they come. One way to know if you're providing positive, meaningful, person-centered experiences is to hear the voice of the people you coach. And here's a game we've played in Ireland, Snakes and Ladders, where children identify what happens with your coaching and in the sessions that puts them up a ladder, but also then what happens within the sessions that maybe makes them slide down a snake. And with that feedback, you can take that on board and work with the athletes you work with. So this is just a formal way of doing it. You have your observation skills of the non-verbal feedback, and then you can also get verbal feedback as well. So that voice of the person is very important. The fourth principle is make it fun and safe. It's the reason you coach the athletes you work with. It's the reason they're there. They want to enjoy it, and you want to enjoy it. But people will only learn if they feel safe. So that's kind of comes down to the environment you try to set and the relationships you form with not only the athletes, but perhaps the significant others in their lives as well. If it's children, it could be parents or guardians. And you're looking to set an environment which is enjoyable and caring and allows them to thrive. And you'll know if they're thriving if they keep coming back. And again, they'll let you know that pretty quickly. So when you do your activities, try and avoid sometimes the fun killers, which is perhaps you talking too long, having the athletes queue up waiting in lines, and then just repeating activity over and over. So what you need to do is make sure you've got enough equipment, be concise in what you ask the athletes to do, and have variety within your sessions. The fun makers that you could be working on would be more game-like in playground games, giving drills which are more fun, and have funny names which perhaps the athletes could help you to call them. Storytelling and building stories around the activities can be a very good way to make fun as well. And then having fun competitions or events and having the variety that are there. So take those on board and try and have more fun makers within your session and avoid the fun killers. Obviously, safety, as I mentioned, is very important. So every athlete you work with should feel safe and comfortable where you're working. And as they feel that way, they'll develop a sense of belonging. And from there, the learning can take place. The fifth, and this is one we really like in the Irish context, is prioritize the love for sport over learning sport. You know, while only a small number of children or athletes might become elite performers or head over to international competition, all of them have the potential to become healthy and active adults. Being active in your life brings you so many benefits: social, psychological, physical, cognitive, and competitive, if that's where your goals are. So if you can get people to love being active and active then for life, you're going to create a fantastic legacy in what you do. And when you work with athletes and children, you'll get the best from them, not by lighting a fire beneath them, but by building a fire within them. And that love of being active is important. The sixth is focus on foundational skills. And this really is something that's emerged in the last 20, 25 years within sport for people and sport for children, and may very well apply to athletes in Special Olympics as well. That you work on foundational skills without being over concerned with the specific skills of your sport initially. And sometimes you go back and work on these underpinning foundational ones. So once people develop the motor skills and learn the basics of how the games can be played, you can apply these then to the particular sports that the athlete will play. These foundational skills can be built on, and without them, it can be very hard to get really, really good at sport-specific activities. So give the children the chance, or give the athletes the chance of success by working on the foundational skills. In ICOACHKIDS, we use the concept of the multi-skill jigsaw. And you can see in that jigsaw the 4 different colors. Looking at the left side of it, at the bottom, we have fundamentals of movement, and we'll go into those a little bit more, and they're balance, locomotion, and coordination. Then on the left, we have fundamental movement skills, and on the right, we have fundamental game skills. These fundamentals, and I'll go into them a little bit more when we go into this principle, help you to underpin the SSS&T, which stands for sport-specific skills and tactics. And really, that's the whole principle here of working on it. And what you're trying to do is making sure the athletes you work with have an opportunity to practice and refine all elements of the multi-skill jigsaw. Apologies for the typo there. Number 7 is engage parents positively or significant others. So they're actually a big resource at your disposal. They tend to want the best for the athletes, and so do you. So partnership is the key to working with them. And when you think of it, while you might do 1 session a week, the families or the parents or the guardians or significant others in their lives can actually continue practice of some of the fundamental activities at home. And that can be very, very positive. So that's where you're looking to engage them positively. And here's an example in a photograph of children taking part with parents and adults and significant others. I suggest if you look at the picture, you can see people of all abilities, and you can see equipment which is suitable for the athletes, and you can see enough equipment for all the athletes to be taking part. I think this has a lot of what we'd call the fun makers from the earlier slide, as opposed to the fun killers. So it's the kind of thing that you can create in your environment. Number 8, principle 8 is plan progressive programs. And what we're trying to do, when you think of it, is take the athletes we work with on a learning journey. And that's the program you try and put in place. So you can develop short, mid, and long-term goals, and then you plan to help them to get to that destination. We're emphasizing the fundamentals here, but that destination then can be the start of another journey into the sport specific. And you can go back and forth between the two. So it's not trying to get everybody peaking by the next event. It's trying to make sure that they're on that journey of, I suppose, enjoyment and continuous development. There's an old saying when it comes to planning, that is, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. The athletes won't get the most out of the program that you're doing with them unless you take all of that into account. And here's a slide we use really to just emphasize, as part of that plan, you have to coach all the bananas. And of course, what I mean there is that all the athletes. And each athlete is different. You'll have those that are very green and new and might not have done a lot of movement and a sport. And you'll have those athletes who are more mature. They've been around sport longer. They may be a bit more mature age-wise, and they're part of your session too. So you really, as part of your plan and your program and your coaching, have to treat each athlete as an individual. It's actually something I think Special Olympics do better than many other sports. So well done to you on that. Number 9 is using different methods to enhance learning. And that's really just trying to say to you that learning is a complex process. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a while for each athlete to move and to develop. So you have to use different coaching and teaching and strategies that can serve different purposes at different stages of learning and development, but they can complement each other, help you to achieve the desired results, and help each athlete to develop. So as a coach, you're going to need a toolbox of activities and drills and games. You're going to need coaching skills like not only planning an organization, but being able to explain and demonstrate, being observing to see if it's working for the athlete. And you're going to have to reflect on all that during a session and after a session, which should leave you pretty drained as a coach, but one that's very, very rewarding, and one of the reasons many of us do coach. The last principle is use competition in a developmental way. We can't work developmentally in our sessions all week or all season, and then when we come to events, just promote winning. Now, there's nothing wrong with competition, just perhaps the emphasis we put on it. But if we look at the development goals we have for the athletes and have worked with them on those, surely we can make sure that we support these during sessions and in competition. And really you're taking account of the goals they have, their needs, and being ready for that event. There is so much fun and enjoyment at Special Olympic events that we want to make sure that every athlete experiences those. And what we want to avoid is that sometimes sitting on benches suits people of a particular age, but when it comes to people involved in sport, they don't want to be sitting on benches. The earlier picture of the session where the parents were involved with the athletes showed everybody involved. And we'd like competition again to have everybody involved working on their individual goals. So, in summary, there's the ICOACHKIDS pledge. You see the 10 points again. Hopefully, as I've been speaking there, you might have taken a few notes or identified some of the points from them that you'd like to emphasize or consider applying in your sessions. As we progress now, we're going to look at 4 of these in a little bit more detail: the foundational skills, engaging parents, planning progressive programs, and using different methods to enhance learning. Now, the points I'm going to make here aren't going to try and answer every question, but it's just going to try to explore it a little bit more deeply for your own consideration. So keep that note taking going. The first of these is focus on foundational skills. And I suppose really what we want to emphasize here is that we're trying to get children to move safely and efficiently. And there's just a couple of definitions there where people can move safely, do the action and not get hurt. And a body that gets fitter and stronger and mobile and flexible will be able to withstand more forces and produce the movements that are in the session. Efficient movement then is where you actually are doing the action with the lowest level of energy expenditure possible. I have to say, when working with children, and I think this applies to athletes with intellectual disability too, that if the fundamentals aren't developed, sometimes movement remains inefficient. So what we're trying to do here is coaching athletes to move well and to think within the activities that they do. To do that, we work on some of the fundamentals of movement, and the foundation, as we see it, are ones like balance. And balance is a state where the body remains reasonably steady and stable. It's the foundation to safe and efficient and effective movement, and it can be static or dynamic. You can see the picture of a young lady here on a balance beam. And really, the elements of this that you look for is that there's a base of support. In this picture, it's the young lady on the beam with her legs one behind the other. Her center of gravity is over that base of support as she stands there. It would have to move if she moved forward, but it's still in a balanced way. She has her arms out as a counterbalance so that she doesn't fall off the beam, and then she must hold her body steady using her core strength. In any activity we do, these are 4 things that you can look for in helping to develop balance in your athletes. And one of the things about this balance is that in the picture, the young lady is upright. You can see she'll move on one leg onto another leg, so her base gets quite narrow. But also you can balance at different levels, which is bent over, and for example, a ready position to move left to right or back or forward. But you can also balance on the ground, on all 4s, on 3 points, and even lying down flat are all elements of where you can balance at different levels. Another of the areas for fundamentals is coordination. And coordination is the skillful and balanced movement of the body and its parts at the same time. There's an internal part to this where you can mentally organize it, and there's the external part of it which produces a kinematic chain. And you can see the young man in the picture here, where his base of support is wider, and what he's going to do is transfer the weight from one foot to the other, moving his center of gravity forward, but still being balanced. He's going to swing the racket to hit the ball, and he's going to follow through with the racket probably on the other side of his body, and he may very well step forward. So that's the kinematic chain. He has to have a mental organization for that in his body. And that's how the balance can be dynamic, but that's also the coordination with this particular skill. Couple of points we also add when we speak about coordination, and this is particularly for young athletes. The children grow from the center out, and if you have nieces and nephews that are young, you'll know that they go from gross motor skill development to fine motor skill development from the age of 1 through 4 or 5. And the same applies from the head down. Heads will move for babies before arms, before fingers, and so on. And the same with legs and feet. So that's the coordination part of it. And every movement skill that you work on with athletes, you'll have that coordination as part of it. The third fundamental of movement the third and fourth we could say, is agility and speed, which is control of the body and its parts in a dynamic environment. And this includes the ability to move quickly and efficiently, starting, stopping, and changing direction and speed while maintaining balance or stability. So again, with the athletes you coach, you would be aware of how well they can do these things. But by practicing them, they'll get better. And those areas that I've just discussed are the fundamentals of movement. The point I'm making too when it comes to fundamental movement skills is that they're combinations of those fundamentals of movement and those patterns. So for each of the categories you see here, stability, object control, and locomotion, and there's examples of specific skills that can be developed, fundamentals, you're taking account of those elements that we've just outlined to make sure that the athletes can develop all the fundamental movement skills that they need. And these underpin the sport specific. You'll notice at the end of each list that there's the word swimming for locomotion, and that can be each of the strokes. In my case, it will be doggy paddle, but there you go. On the stability one, there's floating, where you're trying to hold yourself steady in water. And at the object control, we've got the surfboard in there. And really, that's just trying to emphasize that not all fundamental movement skills are land-based. They can also be water-based, either in or on the water. Depending where you live, and I know Special Olympics do the Winter Games, it can be on ice and snow as well. And indeed, it can also be in the air, where you do activities like diving, and there's more aerial activity as well. So fundamental movement skills are those combinations. And the last fundamental area from the multi-skills jigsaw was fundamental game skills. And this is where people, based on their sport, these are underpinning ones, but they can then get applied into specific sports, that people can develop these game skills, again, at a pace that suits them, like the use of space, like tracking others, like identifying advantages. If you play basketball or football, if you get the ball back, you can counterattack. And if they've put a lot of their players forward, there's less defenders, so you can counter that. You support, many activities are not just individual. So there's support within games. You could be involved in tracking objects as part of the sport. And in many sports, then communication is important. I think even in the individual sports, support helps the athletes in preparation and taking part, and communication sometimes can take place during the sport to help them with their efforts. So they're fundamental game skills. As well as developing, so that's that whole area of developing fundamentals, and that's one of the areas we said we'd go into. The second was engaging parents positively. And really the key thing to emphasize here, it's around building effective relationships with the children, with parents and guardians, and others who can impact the caring environment. So it's the fact that you're all working together to help the athlete to be the best they can be. And that's really the emphasis on parents. The elements that are involved in building this effective relationships are that if you're the lead coach, indeed the coach, you set the key to creating that climate or that environment. You should focus on that before building skills, because then you're going to have a healthy and positive working relationship with the athletes and the parents. Knowing what a child feels and thinks is important. That safety is part of that, as well as what they like to do. And you can work on that. I think showing that you care by actively listening and acting on what is discussed is central to that caring climate and that effective relationship. And then you're using age-appropriate words and body language. As I say earlier, I think Special Olympics does this particularly well and the coaches do it well, but it's worth emphasizing these as well. And especially if you're onboarding new athletes, making sure that they develop that sense of belonging, their voice is heard, and they develop a love of being active is important. You can see what's happening through observation and the enjoyment of the child or athlete and how they interact with others. There was a coach in Ireland called Noel O'Reilly, and he had a saying which was the following, that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Noel was part of the Irish coaching soccer team. He passed on a few years ago, but he was just a man who was really impressive in how he related to the players he worked with. The next one is plan progressive programs. And without getting into details of a program, what I'm going to emphasize here is some of the fundamentals. The environment you set where children and athletes can enjoy playing and learning. The second part is that caring element of it, because if they know you care, they know you'll have their best interests in heart, and what you do in the program in terms of the fundamentals will be part of that. And they should feel safe to learn, ask questions, and take risks. And you'll see athletes come out of themselves when this happens. Then providing plenty of opportunities to learn and improve and get better, and you'll see that. So a lot of the things you do within your culture of acknowledging the athletes will be very central and important to the effort that they provide. One of the planning tools we use in ICOACHKIDS is the coach decision-making model, which was developed by Abrahams and Al in 2015. And what this does is it allows you to plan your program in the context of where you're at. Now, I won't go into it all in a lot of detail, but just to pick out the headings, you've got the culture and context of the club and Special Olympics and where you're at. You're aware of the resources you have, and then you become aware of the athletes you're working with, the expectations of the club, and maybe the constraints that are there. The circle is then the understanding of yourself, your personal values, and your behaviors. And if there is a positive synergy between the culture and context of the club and your values, there's a very good basis on which to develop the program. After that, you consider who are you coaching, and the athletes and their needs and wants. The second thing is the red box, what are you coaching? And we just did the fundamentals. And we think certainly those underpinning sport specific can be very, very useful. And the third is how are you coaching? And that's you identifying within your program how you're going to do it. And the program can have many elements besides just the learning and competence development of the athletes that you work with. So if you're once a week over 8 weeks, or if you're twice a week over 30 weeks, this kind of decision-making model helps you to build on what you're trying to achieve. Other elements that we think should be part of the program would be for you to set a mastery environment, which isn't about doing everything well, it's about doing the best you can do. And that wouldn't generally, you'd need to be taking account of recognizing the effort of the athletes, the targets that are based, and this goes back to your planning of your program and the needs and wants of each athlete, and the targets based on where they're moving from their current ability. We'd strongly emphasize you use language which doesn't compare one athlete to the other. You can be enthusiastic for every athlete and reward the effort and the achievement of the target they're working on. You can do that at your training sessions. And like mentioned earlier, we also think you can do it at competition, so that the athletes can give it their best, and you're working on their individual target. Every athlete can then be successful if they achieve their targets in competition, whatever positioning they end up with at an event. The other thing about the program is that we feel that you should develop life skills with the athletes as people can do with children. So the top one is competence, and we've talked about the fundamentals. But I think also in that caring environment and that mastery climate, you can help people to develop confidence. You can help them develop connection and working with others. And that might be even just taking turns. We can help develop their character to stay to the rules, understand the rules, and then recognize and compliment people when they do well. Even if you weren't the winner, you can still recognize you gave it your best. A caring climate, which is helping each other. And finally, creativity. You will find that the athletes can find solutions to problems that you wouldn't think of. And that's a real added bonus of what you're doing. So those life skills can be part of your program as well. And then this question of, as you run your program and you deliver it, you're going to be taking back information. It's recommended that you should review each session, and you should review on a regular basis where each athletes are. And a colleague of ours came up with this concept of everybody should have an FBI file, which has nothing to do with the American group, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's about you actually having facts about each individual you work with. And you can build that up from knowing birthdays, knowing likes, knowing dislikes, being aware of, people get haircuts, if people come in new gear, if people achieve other things within their life that are important to them. Within your club, you can acknowledge these things. But it can also contain information about how each athlete is progressing on their fundamentals or on their sport-specific applications. So all of that is part and parcel of it. Checking each. The last one then was to use different methods to enhance learning. And really, rather than going into different learning theories and stuff here, it's really just for you to recognize that in the environment you set and the activities you do, is that you're providing guided improvement and that everyone can improve. However, but not everyone will improve in the same way, on the same day, or at the same rate. So that's where you observing and recognizing those improvements is very important in what you're trying to do it. This is a little bit like the art of coaching as opposed to the science of coaching. It's right in that space of you helping each individual. And you just know that development and learning, they're not linear, but they are contextual in what you're doing. And you need to keep working on those environments where children feel safe and cared for, where their view is respected and valued, where they feel a sense of belonging, and then the learning can happen. So to help with all that, you can work on your own coaching skills, not only planning an organization, but your explanations and the language you use, demonstrations. It might not be the whole skill, it might be the part of a skill or a technique. And this setting up and standing back is one of the cores of being an effective coach, that you can set it up and you observe to see if it's working. You're seeing how it's working for each athlete. You're seeing where they might be able to improve. You have a decision to make on whether you intervene or not, or whether you intervene later. And all of that is part of what you're doing. You can hear the athletes, and also by questioning and listening, and you can give them feedback. And all of this is happening during a session, but also after a session where you reflect. Remember, you're helping them with their skills, but you're working on your skills, and like their skills are going to get better, your skills can get better. And that's how you can work on your coaching toolkit. Another tool that helps with learning is to help each of the athletes knowing their stage of development, and we mentioned that, and this idea of the coaching zones, it really is about them not working in the boredom zone, the comfort zone, or the panic zone. It's about them within the learning zone. And depending on the activity and the variety you use, this current ability will go up and down for each athlete. So you need to be always looking for them to have an activity which helps them in the learning zone and not too comfortable. So that's one useful tool when it comes to practical activity. And the other, which is out there, which is very useful, is one called the STEP model, where you, with a particular activity, can get this, you can look at the space that you're in and make that bigger or smaller, use different obstacles or equipment, or even use zones where people can be safe to take their time to do the activity. The task would be whatever activity you're doing. You can change the equipment in that task. You can use a bigger ball, a smaller ball, or you can use a bigger bat, a smaller bat, or soft or bean bags, soft ball bean bags. And then the number of people involved can change as well. And that STEP model is very useful in that context. And really, I just wanted to summarize then this, what children want from a coach. And this is a statement from the Aspen Institute. And in some ways, I think it summarizes the application of the 10 principles and also just the 4 that we delved into. Respect and encouragement will be the first item. It's showing then that you care. You're a positive role model in what you do. And that involves not only a training, but at competition. You develop to help athlete clear, consistent communication. And that can involve the rules of being part of a group, as well as the rules of the game and the rules of including others and so on. So it's all part and parcel of that communication. They obviously need you to know your sport if that's what you're doing. We would just add again that the fundamentals underpinning that we'd see as being important. And really, that someone who listens is so important. And again, I'd emphasize, I think Special Olympics does it very, very well. So they're kind of the key messages. I just did want to go into the signposting for ICOACHKIDS, and I think it's as well to do that before finishing up, is that ICOACHKIDS started as a 7-country project. It's now one that's reaching over 200 countries. And that's something that we'd very much like to, I suppose, run in parallel to what you do with Special Olympics, because you also are a global movement. The signposting really is that there's a new website, and that's the website address there, icoachkids.org. And on that website, there's over 300 resources. It's multilingual, just like today's webinar. There's users on it from over 200 countries, which, as I say, reflects what you're doing. And we're very happy and lucky, we think, to be having approximately 1,000 new users per day. We would love if any of you on this webinar was to engage as well, because we have the same interest in heart, which is the best for every athlete. As part of that, I wanted to point you specifically to a series of mini courses. There's 5 massive open online courses. They're in the Learn section. You'll see it on the bars within the website, and you can go and look at these 5 courses to help you explore some of the principles in more detail, including the ones mentioned today. There's guides, there's videos, all in there, and you can explore those. And then also, I know Special Olympics offers fantastic resources, and I'm sure they'll be emphasized for you again as we go on. So that's really getting to the end of the webinar, where there'll be some questions and answers. Just to point out that the next webinar is on Monday, and it's looking at floorball, a specific webinar with Steen Human. So that's from the See You Next Week from Special Olympics. And I'm going to stop sharing there and say thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you found it of interest. Thank you for the good messages. I was wondering, were there any questions?
Thanks, Declan. Yeah, Mujahid has a couple of questions for you. He's going to ask you now.
Super. And if people can stay, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you for this presentation. Very useful information. We have all benefited from it. We have some questions. What are some ways that coaches can apply with players, with athletes?
Thank you for that question. I'll focus on the four principles that we looked on there. And the first one was being aware of the foundational skills. I think they're very important. When it comes to the plan, progressive programs, I think sitting down with a pen and paper and actually working with you and your co-coaches on the plan that you want to do. Now, it could be a session plan or it could be a wider program, but at least it allows you to work and discuss and get on the same page. It also allows you to discuss setting that caring and mastery environment where every athlete will be welcome and every athlete could benefit from your coaching. As you get better at your coaching, you'll get better at identifying the kinematic chain for each of the fundamental movement skills. And as you do that, you can be very specific on the feedback you give to the athletes. And then I think the whole thing is about parents being able to practice this at home, which can be very useful. And then you just constantly looking to help each athlete in the way they learn best. And that takes some time and energy. One of the skills of a coach is, we use the term trial and error. You try something because you think it'll work with that athlete or a group of athletes, but sometimes it doesn't work. So guess what? You go again. You think of something new, you get creative and you go again. So there's some of the ways I would suggest applying it, those four principles with the athletes that you work with.
Another question. It can be applied to youth, but sorry, connection issue. Connectivity issue, I'm sorry. Connectivity issue.
Have we a
There is
second
a
question?
connectivity issue. I did not hear. ICOACHKIDS program focuses on youth, but these principles can they be applied?
A very good
Again, there is
observation.
connectivity issue with Mujahid.
I think I have the question, so I appreciate that. Yes is the answer. It applies. I think these are good coaching principles that you can apply with anybody, whatever the age group. It's how you apply them will depend on the individual and the group you work with, the environment, the context you're in with the equipment and so on. And really, the emphasis really at the start should be building those relationships, knowing the needs and wants and enjoying what you're doing. If you do that and the athletes come regularly, over time, they'll get more competent. And as they get more competent, it feeds back into the environment and of people wanting to be in there and get better. I think one of the great developments within Special Olympics was the advent of the Young Athletes program, because the earlier children learn fundamentals, it's a great foundation on which to build the sport specific, and that applies to all athletes. So, and I know actually also there are athletes who in other sports that when they get injured and come back, they work their true fundamentals. It's a bit like rehabilitation of locomotion, of balance, and of object control. So they work on fundamentals related to their sport and then go more sport specific. So yes, these apply to everybody. Thanks for that question.
شكرا لك. Thank you very much for this wonderful review of the webinar. Resources Special Olympics offers fantastic resources for coaches to continue to learn and improve their coaching knowledge. Olympics online learning portal, Special Olympics resource page. It has on different sessions on coaching, physical fitness, health, behavior, preventive behaviors. The link to the portal is in the chat box. Special Olympics web hosts different pages in different fields. Make sure to go through it in order to reach all these wonderful resources, including unified sports, young athletes. All these pages will help you in your coaching or in your role as a Special Olympics athlete. These are there are some internet. This year we are continuing the interactive dashboard of us, so that you can participate in a series of the webinar on the internet. You will find here the links of the resources and the recordings and the presentations, and also the possibility of asking questions for the presenters in the interactive dashboard. This is your own source for all the series of coaching series by the internet. The coming webinars on the internet will be the coming one is a workshop on sports. We'll work on the floorboard with Steve Homack. Make sure on registering on next Monday. Thank you again for our partner, Gilgare, for their support of the series of coaching webinars by the internet 2024. Register now. If you have not yet, so as not to miss the chance. Thank you very much, you all, for your participation in the series of webinars. Thank you all for attendance and wish you all the best. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.